Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor, Greg Dooley, and the Pundit, Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
That's right, it's another episode of The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark, and as always, we are presented by Nick Hopwood, who's a certified financial planner, founder and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. I'm sure Nick had a great day on Saturday. How about you, Greg?
Nick, like me, we grew up right in Spartan country. So, yeah, I think Nick had a great day. I had a great day, and we're going to have a great podcast today. And we probably have some new listeners, Steve, because we are now included in a new service, a new app called Autograph. And they feature our show with a bunch of other top Michigan content producers. The company's backed by Tom Brady, and we had a little event with the guys who founded that, and many people you know, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that.
In fact, let's hear from the legend himself, TB12, Tom Brady.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I co-founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the release of a new app that recognizes the biggest Michigan fans. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to the best Michigan content, fan challenges, and exclusive rewards for diehard Wolverines, all for doing the things you already do, like listening to this podcast. Head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Rewarding Fans and download today.
You can look forward to that. Also, business-wise, I've got a few events coming up with the U of M Club of Dallas. It's a Zoom session Q&A, 8 p.m. Wednesday the 25th. So right around the time this podcast comes out, you can check it out on mbictors.com. Friday before the Purdue game, we're going to have a get-together at the Brown Jug restaurant at 5 p.m. with the woman who paints the jug, Jill Gordon. And finally, for any Michigan students who listen, I know that's probably not our demographic, Steve, but if you are, you're smart, you're wise, I give you an A. And I'm going to host a trivia night at Ross Business School on November 2nd at 6 p.m., and I'll have more information about that on mbictors.com as well.
Greg, that sounds absolutely fantastic, man. Just branching out, doing all these different events. It's very cool. Getting noticed. Michigan's certainly getting noticed for not only their win, but what's been happening off the field. But first, let's start with win number 997, Greg. A 49-0 shutout. Michigan finally gets that shutout win. They could have probably had 4 this year, but this is one of the all-timers against the Spartans.
It is. Didn't expect it to go quite like this. In the wake of what happened, it is historic. So you start to look at historic dates and matchups and rivalries and where this fits in. Obviously, it's still fresh in our minds, but a 49-0 beating, not even that close. It was wire to wire in every sense of the word. And of course, because it's a rivalry game and it's frankly so emotional with all the stuff that's going on off the field, it was amazing. And you gave me this advice, Steve, like enjoy it, right? Realize what we've got at this moment, and you kind of want to look ahead to what might be, but enjoy it.
I'm still basking in the afterglow of that. Michigan just basically scored 2 touchdowns per quarter, put in the backups in for the 4th, and then put one little exclamation point at the very end that you kind of tell that they wanted to get in there to make it 49-0. I mean, for people who wanted 50-something, 60-something, I thought the only way that Michigan scores 60 in this game is if Michigan State scores 30, which means they kind of keep it semi-competitive and Michigan has to keep putting up the gas. This game was over in the first quarter. That's when the Wolverines had 14 points, Greg. Michigan State overall was held to under 200 yards of total offense. Michigan had over 200 yards of total offense early in the second quarter. J.J. McCarthy with his personal best 4 touchdown passes.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, I wouldn't call it adversity, but there were some situations that J.J. got us out of with incredible plays on third down to keep drives going. I mean, and the tight ends, Steve, Barner, Loveland, they got other guys in, just had a remarkable game. I can't remember tight ends making that big of impact throughout the game. It's just phenomenal.
So they basically beat MSU's linebackers in coverage between them and the secondary. It was open all day long. Michigan State's linebackers couldn't keep up. Their strong safety couldn't keep up. Colson Loveland had his first multi-touchdown game, while A.J. Barner set a career high in catches and in yards and also got a touchdown. It was apparently the eve of National Tight Ends Day.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that?
Why not month? Is this
What's that like? Are you supposed to wear a color for that?
Yeah, I didn't get you a card, Steve, or what do you get someone?
Hey, I didn't either.
Yeah, okay.
We're all square.
Is this Taylor Swift? Did she cause this phenomenon?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I don't know. It's funny. I happen to know these two young men, Barner and Loveland, off the field. And I can tell you they're fine young men, and just to see their success has been awesome. All the tight ends, frankly. A bunch of other ones played, but those guys were standouts. Grant Newsom, man, what a crew he has. They are phenomenal.
Well, and what we're seeing is what people had been wondering about for the last 2 years. Could Michigan have a passing game? And now people are asking, can we have a running game? Because the passing game is here. It's had 4 touchdown passes by JJ in this one. JJ has 18 touchdown passes this season. Do you know how many incompletions he has on the season?
No, tell me.
Just slightly more than twice that, 37. 37 incompletions, 18 touchdown passes.
And some of those are drops.
It's part of the percentage.
Right.
But JJ's efficiency rating is ridiculous. So is his QBR. It's like tops in the nation. And then defensively, Mike Sainristil with another pick six. That's the second time for him this season. Michigan has 4 interception returns for touchdowns this season, Greg. The defense has only given up 5, and only 3 in the air. This is through 8 games. This reminds me of the 1985 Michigan defense where they hadn't, given up a touchdown until like game number 6 or 7 or something like that. We're through 8 games. Josiah Stewart off the edge. He had 4 sacks in his last 4 games. Had another one this past Saturday. And it's not just on the air where Michigan's defense has been excelling, but how about on the ground? Nate Carter's 4th in the Big Ten right now in rushing yards. He was held to a season low of 36, dropping his average down to 81 yards per game. And remember, Rutgers' Kyle Monangai? He's averaging right now 93 yards per game, but Michigan held him to 27 just a few weeks back. So
the one disappointment, and this is sick, right? This is sickening, was not getting that touchdown or any points at the end of the first half. And I really wanted it for some reason. I don't know. I feel like everyone kind of did. Let's go up 35. They didn't get it. It got screwed up. But I feel like the pick six kind of made up for it in the second half. And then, of course, the late touchdown with Orgy, I happen to know I was sitting right next to Steve at Oscars, and we both wanted it. And then in the back of my head is like, okay, is this going to be a go-for-2 situation that they're going to be talking about for years where they try to get 50? And, of course, they didn't. No, and I heard the other stat, you're talking about the defense, that no team has had a snap inside our 10.
That is correct.
That's wild through 8 games. So
now imagine that basically means that opponents are scoring on big plays. And if you took the big plays out of the equation, I think Michigan would have about 4 shutouts.
Right. And there's some poor guy in Schumacher Hall whose responsibility is goal line defense. And he's so sad right now.
Yeah, he has nothing to do.
Right. Kind of like our kicker.
Michigan destroyed a team that has made you very angry, said things that you hate. You can't stand some of their people in their fan base. You can't stand some of the people that actually report to the media that are pro-Michigan State. It's just seething. Here's the opposite of that.
Yeah, whatever the opposite of that is.
So go ahead and enjoy it.
Probably the biggest win in the rivalry since 2002, were the Bobby Williams game where he was asked, do you have control of this team? He's like, I don't know. And he was fired.
And that is a lesson for every single head coach at any division, high school, college, pros. Never answer a question like that this way, because coaches are asked that a lot. Has this team given up? Do you have control of this team anymore? Don't tell the truth.
Or just like every coach, just talk about something else. Team's going to be fine. We're focused. Yeah, so Bobby Williams gets fired after 2002 game. That was 49-3. That, of course, was at Michigan. This is the biggest margin in the game since 1947, which was 55-0. That's, of course, the Mad Magicians who went on to win the national championship. And it's the biggest margin of victory in East Lansing ever. They had this wrong. They had it on a Big Ten network that it went back to 1902. That's wrong. We didn't play Michigan on the road. We beat them 119-0 in 1902, but that game was at Michigan.
Well, Michigan State has flirted with such disasters like this over the last couple of years. Just earlier this year, Washington beat Michigan State 41-7. Michigan State scoring in the last couple of minutes to avoid the shutout. And then Minnesota back in 2022, same sort of situation. It was in the 30s for the Golden Gophers. That was a real surprise because they weren't expecting it out of Minnesota to come into East Lansing. They again got a late touchdown to prevent the shutout there. So Michigan finally getting that shutout that they probably could have had a couple of them. And it's against Michigan State, as you just said, probably the worst loss at home in their history.
And so we watched the game together, most of it at an event at Black Rock, which is a restaurant on the outskirts of Ann Arbor, kind of between Saline and Ann Arbor. It's kind of one of those restaurants where you cook your own food. And you guys did the pregame show for there. That was awesome. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, and we got to watch that with a bunch of fans. That was sweet.
A lot of people that turned out for that, and it was really, really nice to see.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. It smells like meat, like grilling and cooking, and there's smoke everywhere. But it's awesome. Like
Sam was actually cooking and talking at the same time. I made him do it, and I mean, he looked like he was holding court, like Dad at his outdoor barbecue. And he's like holding court, everybody, and he's flipping meat over, and he's checking the size, and he isn't breaking at all while talking. He's just speaking. I was just marveled by it because I always thought he would stop and stammer or maybe burn some of his food. But he just kept going, and that was pretty cool to see. Sam has a hidden talent.
I saw, and I took a picture of that and tweeted it, Steve. So check it out on @mvictors if you want to see what that looks like. But it was a sweet scene. Great fans, obviously big Michigan fans. And you talked about the dominance. I got to say, I just didn't see that. Just because in my history, State has always played us tough one way or the other. I didn't expect that. And we got it. It was great. It was a great time watching the game. I mentioned we went to Oscars afterward and caught the very tail end in some of the later games. An awesome day. And
had a celebratory hop slam at Oscars.
That's right, in your fancy little glass.
Yes,
that's
well,
right.
That's how they serve it in.
Yeah, in fact, we talked to the owner, Oscar, and he's trying to get Steve and I to do kind of a live episode or a remote episode, rather, at the restaurant, maybe where we have some beers and stuff. So maybe we'll do that, Steve. It sounded like the best idea in the world, just like everything did last night at about that time. But we also had a lot of fun the night before. On Friday at the Chop House. So we were invited as a part of the crew of the company Autograph. You know, we're now featured in their app. And they had a great event and a dinner and a presentation and all that stuff at the Chop House. It was a blast. And Steve and I, we got to meet a lot of the people kind of in the Michigan media family, alternate media family, if you will, like MGO Blog and Seth and Brian Cook were there. Sam Webb was there, Jared Wangler.
Many of the people that we've talked about on the podcast happen to actually be there at the same time.
It's a small world, and just to have that environment in the Chop House is sweet. In the Lloyd Carr room, the wine was flowing, as you know, Steve.
Oh, yeah, because the wine was flowing in my glass. That's where it was flowing towards.
And one of the cool things
going south.
We're talking about restaurants a lot. This is great. You can smoke cigars. They have that special license in Michigan where you can also have cigars in a eating and dining area because it's designated as some special class of restaurant. And so we had a couple cigars, and it was just great and a lot of fun. We got to hear a few words from Tom Brady himself, not in person. And I'm kind of excited to see where the Autograph app goes, too, and see if it helps to boost our profile and our listens for the podcast. So we'll look forward to that and support them.
The idea is kind of a one-stop shop for Michigan fans to kind of go to get a little piece of everything. And,
right.
You know, it was a fabulous evening, and there was certainly a lot to talk about, wasn't there?
Yes.
Over the course of the days.
Yeah. And
the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room, indeed. This was hot on the heels of the announcement, the leak, I guess, that the NCAA is looking into the sign stealing stuff. Everyone listening to this podcast has heard a lot about it. We have some perspective on it, and I'll tell you, in these things, I think what you'll find with us is we'll try to be fair about this, right? We'll try to take the maize-colored glasses off and give you a fair perspective, I think.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Now, we'll see if we succeed. And some of you don't want that. You want us to rant. You want us to go off on the NCAA and how stupid they are. And maybe we'll do a little of that. Yeah, so where do we start here?
Well, first of all, we'll just start with what you just said as an introduction. It is amazing that you can take a particular fan base, whether you bleed blue, green, or red, see the same crystal clear video and come to completely different conclusions as to whose fault and how things start. This is evidence of that last year. We're already seeing evidence of it here this year. Very, very smart people on all sides coming with vastly different conclusions that are so polar opposite. It makes you challenge what you think of such smart people across the other way. And if you feel that way about them, they certainly feel that way about you. But I'm in the mindset that if Michigan did something wrong, they should suffer the consequences like anybody else. I mean, here's my deal, though. And people, I think, share the same opinion. The punishment should fit the crime. And that's where I think the opinions vary drastically. I mean, what level of violation is this if actually something is true? Some people feel that Michigan should be banned from postseason play over this.
That this is so serious that due process should be eliminated. It's an equivalency of somebody being jailed without bail.
Is it a level 3 violation? Is it a level 1 violation?
Apparently, it's not a level 1 violation, or we would know. But maybe we would.
They haven't said anything.
That's what I'm hearing.
They haven't said anything.
Okay.
They're simply under investigation, but there is no notice of allegations. And under a notice of allegations, you would find out what level this is. But there's a vastly different opinion of whether this is cheeseburger worthy or some major on-field cheating going on.
So if there's some kind of electronic system using this information and using it directly on the field, I got it. And what I try to do is go, okay, if this were Ohio State, what would we be doing? We'd all be having a big laugh. We would say things like cheating. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not like bribing a ref. You almost respect it. And I understand their rules. And if they knowingly broke them, then you're right. I think they should be penalized. But okay, I'm not wiping the wins off in the season. I'm not banning them.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think so. I think I would feel that way.
The other thing that I think is predictable in all of these scenarios is the fan base and the local media of the team that's being reported on parcels out every sentence like what I've just been doing, starts reciting what it was like when they went to journalism school and how it's all gone downhill since then, while offering up contrary opinions on their own side. And while everyone else, especially from the rivals, write and speak with figurative torches and pitchforks with such severe condemnation. It is very, very predictable process whenever somebody is being investigated for something. But even Urban Meyer admitted a few days ago that he hired a guy at OSU just to watch Michigan. That was the job. And of course, that guy...
See, my reaction to that is, of course he did.
Why are we surprised by this?
Yeah.
And do you think Urban, who still has an office inside the Woody Hayes Athletic...
calls them we on broadcast.
Yeah, isn't sharing information, what he's learned while being at Fox and going to stadiums?
In coaches' meetings and interviewing players. And some of that stuff is supposed to be off the record. Yeah, I mean, come on. I don't know. What else?
Maybe you want to add another one. 4 news investigative units when it comes to college football coverage. There's ESPN, Yahoo, The Athletic, and USA Today. USA Today broke the Michigan State story.
Mel Tucker.
Yeah, all these news organizations come up with something. Then what happens is very predictable. If something comes out, then the other 3 have only just a few hours to put out whatever they have. No matter what little they have to have something. And if they have nothing, you need to find a way to make it juicier, because you just simply can't have one of those 4 investigative units put out and you have nothing. But you may have nothing, but you got to create something. So, for example, you saw a couple of things come out. I think Yahoo was a part of it first, and then The Athletic came out, then ESPN and Pete Thamel came out. And that was a day later. And I just want to break down just a little bit, maybe a little bit of fun.
Sure.
So when Connor Stalions' name came out, ESPN wanted to make sure that it was known that he had a military background.
That was their little piece of insight.
When you do that, I could not help but present a picture of commandos in black jumping out of planes, rappelling down the stadium walls, and cyber hacking Big Ten coaching offices.
Keeping democracy safe and hacking Big Ten
Yes.
offices. Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the Mission Impossible team.
Right. So one of the things we heard was that a laptop was taken or seized, as many people thought, right, in the early days of this. So a couple of things came to mind was like this image of an NCAA agent like flashing a badge and like declaring this is my crime scene, right? And the state police are trying to come in and, telling someone to stand down.
This is a raid!
Yeah, and, the badge was made out of like tinfoil or gum wrappers or something, but that is probably closer to the reality. They don't have that power. Okay, the laptop would have to be given to them. They can't tape off Jim Harbaugh's office and take the boxes like the IRS or something. Okay.
And that has to do with whether Michigan's going to be cooperative or not in the investigation.
Exactly. So did you cooperate? Right. That's exactly why maybe it was given. But here's the other side of it, which kind of cracks me up, is that I think initially a lot of people went, ooh, a laptop, right? Like evidence and what's on that laptop, right? To me, that's classic, like the NCAA thinking we got him, right? Which is like, it brings me back to like the Zoolander scene, right? Where Hansel's staring at the computer. The files are in the computer, right?
They're in the computer?
He doesn't understand. And here's why I say that, because look, if there's all kinds of video evidence and there's all kinds of emails and things they're looking at, well, all this stuff is either on a shared network drive or in the cloud or something like that. It's not in the computer.
In the computer. It's so simple.
Right. So anyway, I don't think it's a big deal that they got a computer, but I got to chuckle out of that.
Maybe they have their own people with a military background and a vast network to see where emails were sent, and things can be encrypted about what Word or Google documents were actually typed into the computer, even though the files are gone.
I think they're closer to Hansel and Zoolander. That's who we're dealing with here.
Greg, I've never seen the guy.
I've met Connor Stallions at a event, and I each myself. He looks like another one of the what I call kids that works in Schembecker Hall. It's like when I was a young man. I worked in Washington D.C.
He's not a mastermind.
Well, he seemed like a charming young man, but I just see it's one of the kids at Schembecker Hall. They have all these staffers and people that support all those assistant coaches and the strength, and they're running around everywhere. And it's a hard job to get, and they don't make anything, and they work like crazy. But it's cool. And when I meet people like that, I go, okay, this is a go-getter. And I'm sure he's in his 20s. I lump him in with like those graduate assistant type people. Very nice young man. I don't remember a lot, but I talked to him. So when his name came up, I was like, no, but he didn't look like Rambo or like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible or whatever.
Well, according to ESPN, an unnamed source told them that the Wolverines used, quote, an elaborate scouting system to steal signals from future opponents since at least 2021.
But see, I'm okay with an elaborate scouting system. Like, where's the rule breaking now? That's what we need to understand.
That's true.
Okay,
that's absolutely true. But I'm picturing Ocean's 11 at this point.
Right.
That's how elaborate things are going.
So what else, man?
ESPN continues to say they have an unnamed source inside the building that said that he spent much of his time deciphering opponents' signals, often watching television copies of opponents' games. And water is wet, Greg.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Is that illegal?
How could that be illegal?
It's not. But what they're doing is they're painting a picture, with a vast network of knowledge, deciphering and crack coding. And guess what? None of it is illegal. The great news is, from a journalistic perspective, I think every day since it's been broken, every article says stealing signs is not illegal. What may be under investigation is to what methods to gather such information is illegal. And people are assuming the worst.
In reality, is if there's anything that's happened, it's probably an enterprising young person who had some idea. Using data, using analytics, using all this stuff, information, is a source of pride and skill. And the best teams and coaches do it. Did they say, well, did this person have a background in something and say, hey, I can use this skill and help us? And did it go too far? And if too far, where?
That sound means it's halftime here on The Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. And Nick Hopwood is now joining us in studio with his take.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
All right, Nick. So as a professor at Michigan, I'm on kind of a tighter budget now, and cash is more important to me to pay the bills. And I've noticed we've been getting quite a bit more if you keep your money in a money market. So what are you telling your clients, and what are you seeing here?
Basically, I'm telling them this 5+% rate of return for idle cash means we have to look at where we are in the bank and say, we don't want any lazy money earning nothing. Let's see what we can do and move our emergency fund to the money markets.
I love it. I love that term, lazy money, because that's basically what it is. And some people would argue the bank's almost taking advantage of you because they're absolutely using that money to loan out to other people and make plenty, but not giving you a dime.
Yeah, they're loaning out at 7 and 8% right now. And, car loans, boat loans, mortgages, and they're paying you next to nothing on your checking. And, most banks are raising their savings a little bit, but, the online banks and the money markets is where it's at.
And that 5% is looking pretty good compared to what we've seen in September and October of this year. So if you have a question or want to know more from Nick Hopwood, go to peakwm.com or call 734-681-7575. That's 734-681-7575 or simply peakwm.com. Wow. So, Greg, we were in the halftime with Nick Hopwood to discuss matters. We come back out of the field after halftime, and more information has come out. And I think things have kind of taken a bit of a negative turn since halftime. Specific info is out on multiple ticket purchases to opponents' games, alleged evidence of continuous phone video being used, Venmo receipts of tickets being bought, and exchanged video of Stallions communicating with coaches. Boy, Twitter is afire right now.
Yeah, and people didn't think we actually took a halftime, but now they know we actually do take a halftime. It does seem a little more serious. How do you feel? Like there do appear to be some consequences heading Michigan's way of some sort.
And we've come a long way from Instagram photos and vast networks. I mean, did Michigan expense Connor Stalions' purchases for these games that he purchased? Did Michigan have knowledge of how he or his buddies were acquiring info, things like that?
Depending on how you read this rule, which, Steve, frankly, I didn't know was a rule. If you asked me, I wasn't sure that this was a rule. It doesn't matter. It's a rule, okay? But did you know that you couldn't either send or have someone sent to a game? Okay, didn't know. If you asked me, could you videotape at the game? I'd probably go, well, you mean set up cameras and all that? No. Well, wait, could you pull out a phone? I don't know. Maybe they hadn't thought of that because a lot of the NCAA rules are really old. That's probably how I would have reacted. Okay, but here we are.
It is kind of funny. Greg, the rule for outlawing personal visits to other stadiums in 1994 wasn't a rule based on anti-competition. It was a cost-cutting measure to help save the have-nots and reduce their expenses. Hey, a rule's a rule, but, no penalties for clear academic fraud at North Carolina. 5 Level 1 charges against Kansas was reduced to Level 2. Bill Self's Level 1 violation was reduced to a Level 3 after sitting out 4 games, or roughly 10% of their season. But it does seem like the NCAA or someone and the NCAA Infractions Committee has a beat on Jim Harbaugh and wants to make him pay.
It certainly seems that way. Sam Webb on WTKA is pointing to Ryan Day, right? And you're hearing a lot of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely. Ryan Day is the guy. All of the, unnamed Big Ten sources where all these photos and videos are taking place are out of Columbus. This is Ryan Day. And Ryan Day has managed to save his own ass by convincing his fan base that the losses that he experienced in 2021 and 2022 weren't his fault because we got screwed. We got cheated because Michigan had our signals, and because Michigan had our defensive signals, they were able to break long plays to the tune of 42 points last year in Columbus. One thing, Connor Stalions wasn't even hired or on the sideline until 2022, so I don't know what he has an excuse for 2021 in all of this. But it's a brilliant move by Ryan Day because it takes the pressure off him. I'm thinking this fan base would be in such up in arms over losing 3 in a row that he would be fired. And I think he has now successfully convinced his own fan base that he has never lost against Michigan.
Okay, well, I have no idea if he's convinced them of that. But you said 3 in a row, and that implies that there's another beatdown coming here in November. If another beatdown comes, and now, with what we know, now the signs are, it's revealed and they can whisper like Michigan State did their signs. I think it's a different narrative though, Steve. Like, okay, maybe some of them are forgiving them from last year or the last 2 years a little bit, but if we beat them down again, what does that say?
Well, it's funny because no one has taken into account Michigan's beatdown of Michigan State over the past weekend without Connor Stalions on the sideline, with Michigan State knowing what's up and changing their signals and going to the sidelines to call their plays, it didn't change anything in that game. In fact, it was probably one of Michigan's most impressive wins of the season. That hasn't been taken into account over the last 72 hours whatsoever. So I think the way people are, they want to read what they want to read and see what they want to see.
And if this fan base has the opportunity or excuse not to take the L, they'll take it. Delegitimize both Michigan victories, and therefore Ohio State still has this winning streak over Michigan that they can brag about.
Even Nebraska people are coming out saying, we could have won that football game if Michigan didn't. No, you wouldn't have. But but that is the world of Twitter right now.
See, I don't believe that. And again, I'd like to think we put the maize-colored glasses down. I mean, I know enough about football, and I know that everyone's trying to interpret signs and do a lot of things. I mean, I don't buy that at all. So your question is really, did anyone's mind change over the Michigan State game?
No.
And I think you're probably right. Right? Michigan fans, they are pointing to see, but they were like that before, right? So I get it.
As we know, the NCAA has told the Michigan football team that you can't comment on the situation, yet there is a whole bunch of leaks going on, presumably by the NCAA, but we can't prove that.
It does feel like they are out to get Harbaugh, and why else would you leak all of these things? It does seem like they're out to get us. And I do think Harbaugh's personality, and I think I call it what he's had as a series of clunky goodbyes, right? And what I mean by that is the widely rumored that a former staffer involved with recruiting is the guy who gave the evidence to look here, look there, look here, that got the whole cheeseburger gate thing going. These are disgruntled or unhappy people with how they left their relationship with Jim Harbaugh. I'm not blaming Jim Harbaugh for that, but I think it is causing a lot, and I think the NCAA had a really bad interaction with them, and they're coming after him, man. And
well, I think
it's their prerogative, I suppose.
Oh, well, yeah. I think there's more to it than that, too. I think the idea that he is pushing the edge with satellite camps in other states. The NCAA didn't want to have to deal with coming up with rules against that. There was Jim Harbaugh, standing on the table for players being able to transfer once without having to sit out.
Yep.
Now he's come out and talked about compensation for players in general.
Revenue sharing. Every single person that I talk to agrees with should happen. Every single person.
But the NCAA doesn't want it.
Okay, so at this point, we can talk about what the NCAA should and shouldn't do. Yeah, their entire history has been trying to preserve the status quo of what they do and getting crushed in the courts. And the courts have made them change their tune. If they don't realize that now, and they don't do something about it now, they are going to be gone. Like, they could actually have a leadership role in whatever the future of football is and kind of fix all the scheduling problems that the tail wag the dog on all the other sports, right? They could come in and fix it right now. Like, that's what Baker could do.
But Michigan can't do much other than watch the slow drip of information torture while trying to keep it from affecting their team. They'll go into Penn State. I think it's going to be a great matchup. The Ohio State game's going to be a great matchup. You know that if Michigan wins those games, there's going to be a whole bunch of people are saying
they won because of Connor Stalions' info.
Even though he's not on the field, and quite frankly, all teams have to do. They don't need to change their signs like Ohio State said they did in 2022. What happened, by the way, when Ohio State changed their signs in 2022? They got beaten down more. You can put in a dummy call, Greg. They already use 3 signal callers. Switch things up. Take it from the sidelines. It basically makes everything in the past, one simple step, null and void, all the research that may or may not have been done into it.
Yeah, no, I think there's some simple steps. Everyone's going to do it. I think the best thing Michigan could do is keep winning. If they take down Penn State, take down Ohio State, get those 1,000 wins again, which wouldn't that be interesting? If the NCAA says invalidate some wins, does Michigan restart the clock at 991 or whatever they decide to do, and then play it out? I don't think this will affect any playoff ramifications or bowl games or things like that. Right?
There is a call for that, and I don't think it will be listened to, but there is a call for that. We will see where the evidence continues to go. Obviously, since coming out of halftime, we got a little more concrete stuff. I will be open to say that there could be more things added to that makes it very difficult for Michigan to get out of. And the idea that there's going to be instant justice in the NCAA, how long did it take for North Carolina to be exonerated? 5-6 years. Kansas, 5 or 6 years. And these were all level 1 violations. Again, I think the biggest sort of discontentment is the fact that some people feel this is death penalty material while other people feel this is like a level 3 cheeseburger-like offense.
If you're going level 1, what was your example?
The death penalty.
The death penalty.
Yeah.
SMU versus cheeseburger. You're going to have to look at precedent. You're going to have to look at the way the NCAA's behaved. You're going to have to look at, did you even know this was a rule, and should it be a rule moving forward, and why do we have this rule? I think those things matter. It's all got to be sorted out. I can tell you that, and it may not apply in this case, but the NCAA does have some instant powers that they've instituted for NIL, but that shouldn't apply here. Normally, you get 90 days to respond once you get a notice of allegations, but the NCAA is not going to rush their notice of allegations because I think they know that if they are going for a level 1 or something strong or a ban, Michigan's going to come back hard. So they better have their I's dotted and their T's crossed. So they're probably going to take their time. I can't see the Big Ten and Tony Petitti not getting involved if there are discussions around a postseason ban or something like that. If that happens, I think they would step in and go, come on, guys, what are you doing? Okay, number one. And I think Ward Mantle will be on the phone with them. The other thing is, I don't think Michigan has felt like it needs to fight back yet, right, on any of this stuff. The biggest step we've taken is cooperation to some extent with these things and the self-imposed suspension. But we haven't seen what Michigan could do legally. There are people talking like Tom Mars, the lawyer who's kind of affiliated with the university, but we haven't seen if pushed, because it sounds like with some of the things that have been leaked and the statements that have been made, the NCAA has exposed itself a little bit, and it seems like there is ground to fight back. But we don't know what we're fighting yet. We don't know, you know what I mean? And I don't know if it would be smart for Michigan to preemptively lawyer up and go after. So, but
you might be fighting something you're not accused of.
Okay, exactly. So if it does come to it, and someone goes, no, we're going to impose a suspension, Michigan will fight it, man. They'll come back hard. Now, some of the worst rumors that I've heard are that Ward Manuel is actually behind some of this, or so. Have you heard this?
No.
Like, he wants Jim out. Like, that is a talk track. Yeah.
So is Greg Schiano being the person who turned Michigan in and all of this, which is...
People were scrambling.
Oh, yeah. Coming up with stuff that wasn't there. Continue. Ward's one of the rumors?
There was a rumor of Ward. I do think, hey, TV boy, Petitti, go in and fix this if you're thinking that this is going to end up in somehow Michigan being taken off TV or out of the bowl picture. And I think Michigan will fight it if it comes to that. Maybe it's all a strategy to kind of nudge Jim Harbaugh and get him out of the college football and have him go to the NFL like he's talked about the last couple of years. But I wouldn't bet against Michigan in that kind of scenario, and I wouldn't bet against the NCAA making big mistakes along the way, and I think they already have that could be exposed. My money would be on Michigan at least being able to defend itself. And again, I think I mentioned this. I think I would see them fighting back. So one more thing that the NCAA is doing is they've already announced that as part of their proposals for January that they're reviewing, they are kind of moving away from like team level and player level punishments. Now, if there's a case where they might instill a team type punishment, it might be something if there's been an unfair advantage in the field, right? But what they're focusing on is really punishing individuals. Like, you notice Jim Harbaugh, when he had his self-imposed suspension, he could coach during the week. They're trying to get rid of that. So when they target someone and they have a penalty, when they have a show cause, they want more teeth to it where it follows you. They want a database of level 1 and level 2 infractions for individuals. They're putting all those things in, but it was all under the message of we want to punish the people that committed the crimes, not affect the player athletes and that. So again, I don't think they're gonna keep in that spirit if they see that this caused an unfair advantage on the playing field, which is what the implication is. So keep an eye on that.
It does seem like an unfair advantage. how much, again, it goes to the extent where there's debate, whether it means everything in every single game played versus there seems to be evidence where it doesn't matter, but it looks like it should. If you understand what signs are and you could play against them, it could obviously affect an outcome.
Does the penalty fit the crime? We don't know what the crime is exactly. We don't know what the penalty is. But that's probably, we've kind of, since halftime, we've moved on to what is this going to be? When is it going to be? How is Michigan going to respond? What precedent do they have? What other information about other schools is going to be revealed? I will say, don't count out the NCAA for making more missteps, but what kind of fair court or fair trial can you get? Where can a court come in and arbitrate this? I think Michigan's going to fight it. We'll see.
I got just a couple of things I want to sum up just to educate our listeners a little bit. There's two great reads you should need to go to. One is from The Athletic. Just kind of Google the game within the game, secrets of a college football signal stealer. You can either rewind to hear me say that word for word over again or just use a few of those key words that I used. And what you'll find is an article from 2018, an undercover nameless guy who talks about how easy it is to sign steal and why coaches don't change their signs even though they're aware it's becoming easier and easier to do so, based simply on TV coverage. One of the quotes I love, the ones that are complaining about the most are the ones who are probably also doing it. I think that's kind of, funny to look at. No, you got to look at. So it's absolutely enlightening, and just keep in mind it's a 5-year-old article. The second thing I think that is worth kind of looking at, and this the most sobering commentary to me comes from a guy named J. Brady McCullough of the LA Times.
I saw that,
where he feels the NCAA and Michigan have an all too familiar feel, where he's seeing a similar path with USC. Not saying that Michigan is dirty, but the NCAA salivating to get to the Wolverines like they were just hell-bent to get after the Trojans. One of the steps that are involved, and we're certainly seeing this happen, sit back and watch the public shaming of your target and establish your narrative across millions of clicks while your target is not allowed to respond to the ongoing investigation.
Yes, so I think the steps were identify a target, Jim Harbaugh. Make a leak, was that the second one? And then 3 was let it play out and do what you just described. And it was really interesting. And a lot of people are reading that article.
Greg, let's talk about other things that are going on in the Big Ten and some interesting games this particular week.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I watched the Penn State-Ohio game. I don't know that I learned a ton about these teams. I saw Ohio State struggle to get a yard when they needed to get it. Both defenses look really good, which you talked about. I don't know if they're as good as Michigan on the defensive side of the ball. I wasn't super impressed on offense. Big shock. Marvin Harrison Jr. is amazing. Ohio State, gutty win, but wasn't really impressed with either team. And frankly, and I don't know if it was the defense, but they seemed like they gave Drew hour fits where I was not impressed at all with the dude.
Yeah, so Marvin Harrison Jr., he had about as many yards as the Penn State offense did in the first 56 minutes of the game. He had 162. Penn State had 240, but 73 of those yards happened on their last drive in the closing couple of minutes. They started off 0 of 15 on third down. The massive takeaway in all of this is clearly Ohio State's worst team in quite some time. This appeared to be Penn State's best team in quite some time. People in Happy Valley just feel it's a fait accompli that they're going to lose to Michigan. They're starting to look at James Frankel and they're starting to look at their program and say, is there another level for us to get to? And can we get it with a different head coach? What more do we need to do? And start identifying that. And I think, Penn State fans are just sitting in the aftermath going, man, this should have been the year. And they still could technically get in with some tiebreakers, but things can happen. But they're pretty much under the blanket sobbing right now.
Yeah, I bet. That hurts. And I don't know, man. When you can't get over the hump like we've experienced for a long time until we did, I feel like that's the position they're in. Of course, they've had their success very limited against Ohio State, had a little bit against us, but their fan base classically feels like they are peers of Ohio State and Michigan and deserve a place at the top, and they haven't earned it.
Saturday's loss, James Franklin 1-9 against Ohio State. 4-15 combined against the Buckeyes and Michigan.
Brutal.
But
I didn't even realize it was that bad.
They felt really good because they beat Utah in the Rose Bowl this past year, and their only 2 losses were to Michigan and Ohio State. Competitive in the Ohio State game, not competitive all in the Michigan game. they'll have their chance, but they're going to need a series of tiebreakers to work. Last night, as we were celebrating and basking in the glow of Michigan's 49-0 win, we were discussing the tiebreakers, and my first reaction to you asking the question was, man, it goes so far down the list we can't even possibly tell. And you didn't stop.
No.
You didn't stop,
No.
and I said, okay,
Let's talk about it.
Let's look this up.
All right. So should we go through this? So under the scenario that you guys are all thinking, like Michigan drops the game in Penn State. So basically Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State win all their games, and each team wins the home game that they have against the 3 team. Goes to the 5th tiebreaker in the Big Ten rules. First, try to do it within your division. You can't because these teams have won all their games and beat the division. So now you have to go to the West. And how they go to the West is, okay, each team plays 3 Western opponents. It's the total cumulative record of those 3 Western opponents that you play. So it's the combined record of them in the Big Ten compared to the other 2 that are in this 3-way tiebreaker, right? So, Steve, you did a little math. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Greg, the 3 teams that Penn State play in the West, their non-divisional opponents, are Iowa, Illinois, and Northwestern. And coming into last Saturday, they were 5-6.
Their combined cumulative Big Ten record. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's 5-6. Ohio State has Minnesota, Purdue, and Wisconsin. Their cumulative record is 4-6. Michigan has Minnesota, Purdue, and Nebraska. Coming into Saturday, Greg, their cumulative record was 3-7. Based on a 5-6 record, if the season ended before last Saturday, Penn State would win that particular tie-breaking subset and would represent the Big Ten East. Now, the game's played from this Saturday, and we have flipped. All 3 teams on Penn State's non-divisional record, Iowa, Illinois, and Northwestern, they all lost.
Yep.
Which now drops Penn State's non-divisional opponent's cumulative record to 5-9. Ohio State and Michigan had only 2 of their teams played because Purdue was on a bye week. Both their teams won. So now if it ended this particular week, Ohio State would be a representative at 6-6. Michigan would drop to second at 5-7, and Penn State is at 5-9. Now, there are many more weeks to go in the Big Ten.
Yep.
There are games that everybody is going to be rooting for,
Yeah.
essentially in this conversation, because Ohio State and Michigan play both Minnesota and Purdue. And the only way Michigan can have a better record than Ohio State is for Nebraska to have a better record than Wisconsin.
And they play each other.
Yes.
Right. So, a couple things. We should probably have the disclaimer at the first point. The whole point here is that Michigan would have to lose to Penn State. And so some of you are going, thanks for this loser talk. Hey, we're just doing it, man. First of all, we're just saying. But I say that because a lot of people would go, look, handle your business. If you don't handle your business, then you're going to have to deal with some goofy scenario like this, which is pretty goofy.
Completely agree with you, Greg. Take care of business. Avoid this helpless and trivial situation from playing out. I just gave you, though, what Michigan needs to win the tiebreaker over Ohio State. You also want Iowa, Illinois, and Northwestern to lose as much as possible, except maybe to Wisconsin, because when those 3 teams win, it helps Penn State.
So let's hope this never happens. Or is it fun to talk about?
But no, it's fun. I feel it's necessary to talk about because people are starting to want to know. And it's starting to filter out.
Penn State wants to know.
Penn State definitely wants to know, but some of this information is starting to filter out.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, I'm less worried about that Penn State game and that outcome being bad after watching them. And I almost think the only team that's going to beat Michigan on its current schedule is Michigan right now. If something happens, there's an injury, we just have a horrible game against Penn State. I feel pretty good about the Ohio State game.
Yeah, but it does set up a scenario that Michigan has to be perfect to guarantee themselves a slot in the college football playoff, where other teams can, in other years could have lost a game and backdoored like Ohio State did, and other teams have backdoored losing a conference championship game. TCU lost their championship game.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be real tough. And nationally, we saw USC lose again. We saw, was it an undefeated North Carolina team get dropped?
They did. They got beat by a Virginia team, and there's only like 6 or 7 times in history where a 1-5 team actually beat a team ranked in the top 10. And that actually happened this past Saturday. That game kind of ended strangely, but no game ended stranger than the Iowa-Minnesota game.
No, that was wild, and we got to see it there at Black Rock. I'm sure people have saw it, but basically a late punt return by Iowa once again, pulling a victory out of what looked like the jaws of defeat. But of course, on the replay, the punt return for a touchdown is called back. Not from what they were looking on the replay, whether he stayed in bounds on the punt return. They found something else, Steve. What did they find? Tell them.
Well, what they found was, and what they ruled was, an invalid fair catch signal. So the argument in the instant aftermath was that wasn't a fair catch signal. And the officials would agree with us 100% on that. That wasn't a fair catch signal. Kirk Ferentz said after the game, he says, we were told before the game that you raise your hand way above your head, and that's a fair catch. He didn't do that. Well, in the aftermath, the 24-hour rule, when everybody goes ballistic and you allow 24 hours to happen, we realized what the officials did call was an invalid fair catch signal. So if you improperly do a fair catch signal, it is the same result as the fair catch signal. It means the ball is dead as soon as the ball's secure, whatever. And therefore, the touchdown was nullified. It absolutely destroyed a great moment in a college football game to bring that back. And it actually helped Michigan, which we'll talk a little bit later.
No, but you said the referees called. They didn't call anything. They saw it on the replay, noticed it, and made the right call after the fact, which I think one of the earlier questions was, is that even reviewable? And it showed up on the review. So I don't know. Steve. I would have been pissed about it still.
Well, let's take a look at the reason why they reviewed the play to begin with was whether to see he stayed in bounds.
Yeah.
And then while looking and tracing back to see whether it was in bounds, then they discover something else on tape. And that has people questioning, can you review something that you weren't intending to review?
Should you? So obviously you can. Should you be able to? That's a question for me. I hate replay. Actually, I found out John Bacon agrees with me on my 30-second rule, by the way, Steve, that you get 30 seconds to make a decision. If you don't have it, the play stands, whatever was called in the field. Yeah, it's frustrating to me, but okay. I heard the same thing you did, that a former Big Ten referee or whatever, you just said, no, they made the right call. I just have an issue with these different leaps that we had to make, and was reviewing this, found this, changed it. This is the interpretation. It's like, come on, guys. So I feel horrible for Iowa. PJ Fleck was sure happy. They needed that one, man. He was practically in tears after the game.
He was Facebooking his wife. First time that his team, his Minnesota
he
team.
He was Facebooking. He was so happy.
Yeah, it's the first time his team that he has led at Minnesota had ever beaten Iowa for the Floyd of Rosedale, which is a big-time trophy like the Little Brown Jug is, at least for Iowa and Minnesota fans. Minnesota hasn't had a lot of trophies in their trophy case. They started getting Paul Bunyan's axe for a couple of years. Now they got Floyd for the first time. PJ Fleck is all about image, and now he has an image and an actual piece of hardware, 90-pound pig, that he could put in his trophy case. So, yeah, Kirk Ferentz, after that punt return, you basically look at his face and he says, I don't know how we keep winning these games.
Yeah.
But then they ended up losing the game.
Yeah, that DeJean, what's his name?
Cooper DeJean.
That guy's a baller, man. He is a baller. Yeah.
Definitely should be playing in the NFL.
It doesn't take away from that sweet. I mean, obviously it does take away, but like the respect I have for the guy for making that play, because he did the same thing, not quite as dazzling, but took a punt return back against Michigan State that helped them beat State at the end of the game, when, again, they could have lost that game. So remarkable. We love it. We talk about the Hawks a lot. So we had the guy from Hawkeye Insider on the show. I wonder if we've kept any of those listeners, Steve, because we talk about the Hawkeyes. Right. They're fascinating. Yeah.
From the drive to 325 to how they pull games out, how you can have 2 yards of total offense in the second half and still be on the cusp of winning a game.
Yeah, and up until recently, the two Michigan guys, the transfers, all in Cade, of course. So, hey, it's great.
I was getting into a situation where they're better off punting on first down so that their defense and special teams can make a play and win the game for you.
That's old school. That used to be strategy in the game. And the other reason they did that back in the day, it was all about field position. But also for a long period around 1900 and beyond, the punts were live balls. So you had a thing like an onside punt. So you basically could kick the ball and try to handle it before the other team did. You would get the ball back.
So it's not an exaggeration when they say Brian Ferentz has taken the Iowa offense back 100 years.
You got it. And they have
It's
a
true.
fantastic punter, by the way.
Torrey Taylor is a fantastic punter, and he's going into the NFL too. But their offense is just so atrocious without their best playmaker. They're atrocious to begin with, and you take their top 3 playmakers out, it's even worse. We're going to actually doing some Iowa watching going forward, depending on how Michigan does the rest of the Big Ten schedule. Okay.
Cool. So, programming note, we might take the bye off, but just like when the Cheeseburger Gate stuff came out and all that, we hop back in the studio. We might take a week off of the bye week, or maybe do something special, or maybe we suggested up front, something live, and maybe shorter, a little different format. But stay tuned, and you guys know where to find us.
Michigan with another great victory over Michigan State, 49-0. Michigan football back-to-back Big Ten champions and winners over Ohio State and Michigan State. Go Blue, Greg.
20 straight conference wins, man. Go Blue.